In the early decades of the 25th century, as Earth's resources dwindled and the whispers of humanity's impending extinction grew louder, the eyes of survivalists, corporations, and governments turned outward to the stars. Titan, Saturn's largest and most enigmatic moon, was chosen as a proving ground for a daring new experiment, the first moon harvest. More than a simple mining operation, it was a precursor to the radical process of planet cracking, a technological marvel capable of splitting celestial bodies to extract their mineral-rich cores. A sprawling colony soon took root on Titan's frigid surface, its structures clawing into the icy terrain like roots of a desperate tree. Scientists, engineers, and laborers worked side by side, analyzing Titan's geology and reinforcing its crust with stabilizers and seismic dampeners. They lived beneath the thick domes and flickering lights, racing against time, driven by the belief that if this failed, there might not be a next time. By the 2440s, their efforts culminated in success. With a thunderous rupture felt through space itself, Titan was cracked open like an ancient egg, its molten heart yielding an abundance of rare minerals and fuels. Humanity cheered from Earth and Mars alike, unaware of the cost that would come in time. For now, the mission had delivered. Titan's harvest met the insatiable needs of a civilization on the brink, pushing extinction just a little further away. Despite its initial success, the harvest of Titan came to an abrupt and unexplained halt before the moon could be fully dismantled. What remained was a jagged shard of the original moon, an immense broken fragment still anchored in Saturn's orbit. Curiously, it was the very shard where the first colony had been established, as if fate had preserved the cradle of the operation. Though the grand ambitions of harvesting Titan had ended, the colony itself did not wither. On the contrary, as planet cracking gained momentum across the solar system, the station of Titan's shard transformed into something far greater. Its position, remote yet centrally connected, made it a natural hub for deep space mining operations, and a critical research outpost for studying planetary fragmentation and gravitational stability. Infrastructure boomed. Modular habitats gave way to permanent structures. Commercial zones sprouted like weeds. Glowing malls, market stalls, and neon-lit arcades drew in a constant stream of transit workers and curious travelers. What began as a scientific enclave evolved into a living, breathing city, one built on the edge of a vacuum, thriving on the promise of progress. Titan Station, as it came to be known, became a strange contradiction. A vibrant metropolis clinging to the remains of a half-destroyed world. It stood as both a monument to humanity's technological ambition and a silent reminder some operations are abandoned for reasons never fully understood. Titan Station began to feel the quiet tremors of collapse, not from within its fractured shard of a rock, but from the slow decay of the industry that had birthed it. The infamous USG Ishimura incident sent shockwaves through the planet-cracking sector, eroding public trust and corporate confidence in what had been once humanity's most ambitious method of resource extraction. Rumors swirled, hushed and buried underneath layers of classified reports. But the damage was done. The CEC, once a titan among interstellar corporations, began posting heavy quarterly losses. Contracts dried up, ore shipments dwindled, and with them, so did the lifeblood of Titan Station. Mining support services, long the backbone of the station's economy, folded or scaled back operations. Bays once filled with loud machinery and energized crews fell silent. The malls grew quieter. The streets, once bustling with travelers and vendors, emptied as jobs vanished. Unemployment surged, and with it came unrest and uncertainty. Titan Station, suspended in Saturn's shadow, had always thrived on motion, on the constant influx of labor and wealth. Now with the industry in decline, it had begun to stagnate, its heart still beating, but slower and weaker as if bracing for the storm to come. Amid the economic downturn and rising unemployment, Titan Station, by then widely known as the Sprawl, found an unlikely lifeline. EarthGov, ever discreet in its ambitions, funneled a series of classified research grants into the station's infrastructure. Officially, these funds were meant to support scientific advancement and deep space experimentation, a way to repurpose the station's once vital workforce. Unofficially, whispers among the remaining technicians and administration staff hinted at something darker, off-the-books projects, unexplained material shipments, and entire sectors of stations cordoned off for security purposes. Still, for a time, the money flowed. New research labs were constructed under the guise of economic revitalization. Former miners and dock workers were retrained, repurposed as low-level lab technicians or security personnel. Shops reopened, commerce ticked upward, and the Sprawl's flickering lights steadied once more. It wasn't a full recovery, not by a long shot, but it gave the station purpose again. To most, the nature of the research didn't matter. It paid, and it kept the lights on. But buried deep beneath the surface of the Sprawl, in those quiet, restricted sectors, something had begun to stir. Something that would soon unravel the fragile revival the station had so desperately clung to. Over the course of 3 long years following his rescue from his derelict escape shuttle, Isaac Clarke was kept hidden from public eye, buried deep within the cold, sterile wards of Titan Station's medical center. Alongside him was Nolan Strauss, a fellow survivor of exposure to the marker signal. Both men irreparably scarred by what they had once witnessed, and by what still lingered within their minds. Under the direction of EarthGov's director, Hans Tiedemann, the Sprawl's highest levels of research are no longer dedicated to exploration, but to obsession. Tiedemann and his team of lead scientists knew the truth. Buried within Isaac and Strauss's fractured physiques were the blueprints, the very code for constructing a marker, the same forbidden technology responsible for mass death and madness on Aegis 7 and aboard the USG Ishimura. They did not ask for the knowledge, they took it. Day by day, test by test, the images were extracted, sometimes with machines, sometimes with chemicals, and always with cruelty. Isaac and Strauss became unwilling architects, forced to recreate the very horror that had destroyed their lives. Eventually they were accumulated in the construction of a massive marker deep beneath the Sprawl, hidden from public view, but radiating its presence all the same. The effects were subtle at first, whispers, insomnia, unease, then came the shifts in behavior. Children were among the first to change, becoming anxious, paranoid, unrecognizable. Murders erupted without motive, suicides followed in waves. What had once seemed like isolated incidents soon mirrored the horrific outbreaks on Aegis 7. Titan Station was no longer a research colony. It became a cradle for madness, and at its heart pulsed a new marker, a monument to Tiedemann's ambition, and a harbinger of the darkness to come. Next to the efforts of the covert unitologist cell, a chain of events was set in motion that would doom the Sprawl. Among the cell's assets was Carrie Norton, a mid-level systems technician working within the government sector. A devout but wavering unitologist, Norton had been convinced that her mission, sabotaging specific security protocols, would pave the way for what she had been told was a spiritual awakening. Instead, her actions disabled key containment systems surrounding the marker research site, triggering a catastrophic breach. Within hours, the first necromorphs were unleashed. At first, the outbreak was limited to the government sector. Carrie, horrified by what she had done, tried desperately to undo the damage, scrambling through the corridors she had once maintained, sealing off vents and alerting the few security personnel who would listen, but her efforts were in vain. The infection spread too quickly, and the whispers of the marker, amplified by the unitologists surrounding her, twisted her resolve. They told her this was destiny, that what was happening was necessary. Whether through misdirection or guilt-fueled desperation, Carrie made one final, devastating mistake. In an attempt to isolate the outbreak, she rerouted power to the auxiliary transit systems that bridged the government sector with the public sector. Containment collapsed, the necromorphs poured through. Civilians had no warning. Within minutes, screams echoed through the shopping districts. Apartments, transit hubs, the public sector, once a thriving heart of the Sprawl, was transformed into a slaughterhouse. And far below, in the locked chambers lined with red script and steel, the marker pulsed, feeding off the chaos, drawing the station ever closer to convergence. The necromorph infection showed no mercy. It tore through the Sprawl with horrifying efficiency, moving like a living plague through homes, markets, and schools, leaving behind only blood and silence. Families were slaughtered in their quarters. Children, once playing in climate-controlled parks, were consumed or transformed into shrieking abominations. The public sector became a carnal house, a monument to panic and death. In the chaos, Director Tiedemann took the only action left to him. He declared martial law. Security forces were deployed en masse, but they were unprepared for the nightmare unfolding before them. Even as the chain of command crumbled and the infection overwhelmed containment lines, Tiedemann broke a long-standing earthquake protocol. Guidelines that stated no infected zone was to be evacuated under any circumstance, and ordered a mass evacuation of the station. It was a desperate gamble. Shuttles were launched from every available port. Transit hubs were flooded with terrified civilians. Lines disintegrated into riots. Security forces, already stretched to the brink, were tasked with both fighting the necromorphs and maintaining some semblance of order. It quickly became apparent that the infection was spreading faster than people could move. Then came the grim declaration. The public sector was now considered beyond acceptable recovery conditions. All resources were redirected to isolating the remaining sectors and protecting key earthquake assets. No official records were kept of how many actually escaped. Some say a handful of shuttles made it out before the lockdown sealed the Sprawl's fate. Others believe that no one left at all, that the evacuation was merely a smokescreen. Final gesture to mask the truth. Whatever the case, Titan Station was lost. The infection had consumed it. And deep beneath its surface, the marker was still active, whispering to the dead. During the height of the chaos, as necromorphs tore through Titan Station, and panic gripped every corridor, Isaac Clarke, broken, hunted, and still haunted by the marker's voice, became the last, best hope for stopping the nightmare. And Director Tiedemann knew it. Despite every effort to contain him, surveillance, armed patrols, sealed transit lines, Isaac continually evaded Earthcuff's grasp. His knowledge of the marker and his determination to destroy it made him the single greatest threat to Tiedemann's ambitions. Desperation gave way to brutality. In a calculated move, Tiedemann ordered all power and life support to be cut from the transit hub, a vital artery connecting the public sector to the government sector. The corridors plunged into darkness and freezing vacuum, transforming into a gauntlet of suffocation and silence. It was a death sentence designed to halt Isaac's advance. But Isaac, ever resourceful, found a way. In the outer maintenance bays, he rerouted power from the Sprawl's long-dormant solar arrays, restoring critical systems to the hub and breathing life back into the station's spine. The path to the government sector reopened. Infuriated, Tiedemann escalated. With cold precision, he commandeered the solar array's beam itself, an immense column of focused energy designed to power and heat entire city blocks. He redirected it, not to aid the station, but to sever it, being carved through the connection points between the Sprawl's civilian zones in a central shard, vaporizing bridges, docking arms, and transit corridors in seconds. The Sprawl, once a spiraling ring of life around Titan's core fragment, was now two isolated halves, one in ruin, the other under Tiedemann's tightening control. It was a brutal act of sacrifice, cutting off thousands of survivors for the sake of one goal, keeping Isaac Clarke away from the marker. But Clarke was already coming, and no wall of steel or light would stop him. Yet again, Tiedemann's efforts to stop Isaac Clarke failed. Determined to reach the marker and end the nightmare once and for all, Isaac executed one of the most daring feats, repurposing the powerful gravity tethers aboard the derelict USG Ishimura, still docked within the Sprawl. The physical pull of the shard, Tiedemann's stronghold, back towards the severed remains of the station. The maneuver tore through what was left of Sprawl's infrastructure, but it worked. Isaac had created a path. Joined by Ellie Langford, a former pilot and fellow survivor, the two commandeered a massive mining drill and tore their way into the heart of the Earthcuff compound. The sheer force of the incursion shattered reinforced walls, but it had also opened a passage for something worse, the necromorphs. As Isaac approached, Earthcuff forces mounted a final, desperate defense within the corridors of the shard. One heavily fortified squadron nearly succeeded in killing Isaac as he pushed forward towards the marker chamber. Pinned and outgunned, Isaac was left with only one option: sabotage. He rerouted the power grid, plunging the sector into darkness and disengaging the sealed blast doors. What followed was carnage. A tide of necromorphs surged through the open doors, led by the unstoppable Ubermorph, a towering regenerating monster of bone and sinew. The Earthcuff soldiers fought to the last, but were quickly overwhelmed, torn apart within moments. In their death, they inadvertently cleared the path to the marker, but with the death came something worse. The mass of necromorph biomass gathering near the marker triggered the beginning of a convergence event, the final stage of the marker's cycle, where all reanimated tissue would merge into the birth of a brethren moon. Isaac had come too far, suffered too much to allow that to happen. In the depths of the marker chamber, reality itself began to unravel. Isaac was forced into a final confrontation, not with flesh, but with the haunting image of his dead lover, Nicole. a manifestation of the marker's control over his mind, twisting grief and guilt into psychological torment. The hallucination threatened to break him entirely, but Isaac resisted. By facing his trauma and accepting Nicole's death, he shattered the marker's influence over his psyche, and with it, the marker itself. The convergence event collapsed, the necromorphs fell still, and for a moment, there was silence. In the end, even victory came at a terrible cost. The destruction of the marker, while halting the convergence event, and ending the necromorph outbreak, unleashed a catastrophic surge of energy, an uncontrollable wave of raw, destabilizing force that ripped through the core of the Sprawl, already fractured by the outbreak, bombarded by mining equipment, and severed by Tiedemann's own desperate measures. The station's infrastructure could no longer hold. The blast destabilized the fusion reactors. Buried deep within the station's foundations, alarms echoed across empty corridors, flashing warnings drowned out by the groan of failing bulkheads. In the rising heat of the meltdown protocols, reactors went critical. A chain of blinding explosions tore through the station, engulfing both the civilian sectors and the Shard in a silent inferno of vacuum and flame. Titan's orbit was left littered with twisted wreckage and frozen corpses. Remnants of a once thriving colony turned to ash in the shadow of Saturn.